Denmark resisted the Nazis and saved 90% of their Jewish population. Denmark is the smallest Scandinavian country. Germany is Denmark's southern neighbor and Sweden is its east neighbor. The Denmark capital, Copenhagen, is connected to the Swedish city, Malmö, by a 5-mile bridge. The approximate population of Denmark in 1940 was 3.8 million people. Of them, 7,800 were Jews. On April 9, 1940, German forces occupied Copenhagen and other Danish cities as well as ports in Norway from Narvik to Oslo. The German invasion was supposedly done to protect Denmark from an Allied attack. Hitler wasn't particularly interested in Denmark, but he needed an easier way to attack Norway. Once Germany controlled Denmark and its air bases, invading and attacking Norway was that much simpler. Denmark was now the second country that had been invaded by the Nazis, the first being Poland. Shortly thereafter, Norway was under Nazi power as well and became the third invaded country. Denmark remained a sovereign state that was under the protection of Germany until 1942. The resistance to the invasion was minimal and mostly entailed of rare, small acts of sabotage. As German brutality increased, the Danes' acts of resistance were becoming bolder. Denmark was not liberated until the end of World War II, but their nonviolent resistance hindered the progress and success of the Nazis. Denmark did the most possible to save their Jewish population by not allowing Nazis to achieve what they had intended.
In den Morgenstunden des 9. April landeten zum Schutze der norwegischen und dänischen Neutralität in zahlreichen Häfen Norwegens und Dänemarks deutsche Truppen. Eine in der Seekriegsgeschichte beispiellose Leistung. Wachsam nähert sich das Schiff im Schutze der Nacht seinem Bestimmungsort. Unbemerkt sind die ersten deutschen Truppen in Kopenhagen gelandet. Wenige Minuten später überfliegen planmäßig Einheiten der deutschen Luftwaffe die Hauptstadt Dänemarks. Sie werfen Flugblätter ab, die die Bevölkerung darüber aufklären, dass unsere Soldaten nicht als Feinde, sondern als Freunde kommen und allein zum Schutze der dänischen Neutralität das Land besetzen. Der deutsche Gesandte in Dänemark, von Rente Fink, mit General Himmer vom deutschen Oberkommando, die in den frühen Morgenstunden des 9. April erste Verhandlungen mit der dänischen Regierung führten. Neugierig sehen die Kopenhagener der Landung immer neuer deutscher Truppen zu.
In September 1942, the Nazi secret police, also known as the Gestapo, decided to deport all of the Danish Jews to concentration camps, just like they had done to millions of other Jews across Europe. Fortunately though, George Duckwitz, who was a German naval attaché who worked at the German embassy located in Copenhagen, had tipped off Hans Hedtoft. Hans Hedtoft was a leading member of the Danish Labour Party. Hedtoft, who would later become Denmark's prime minister, warned the Jewish community of Denmark and told them to flee the country. Denmark had been occupied for 3 years by 1943, but the Jews were protected by the Danish government and were unharmed by the Nazis. This was because the Danish government collaborated with Hitler. A campaign by the Danish resistance caused Germany to end up being in full control of the Danish affairs. The Danish government resigned in August of 1943, giving control to the Nazis. 1 month later, September 1943, Hitler had ordered for all of the Jews of Denmark to be deported. The Nazis had planned a raid that coincided with a significant Jewish holiday, Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. The Nazis had the names and addresses of all of the Jews in Denmark. Denmark was in panic and found a way to save their Jews overnight. On the boats, usually 10 to 15 passengers would be taken to Sweden at a time. The children were given sleeping pills to keep them from crying as they crossed the sea to neutral Sweden. Approximately 7,200 Jews were safely brought over to Sweden. Although the majority of Denmark's Jewish population was saved, not all of the rescues were successful. For example, a collaborator betrayed a number of Jews who had hid in the church's attic to the Gestapo. 80 Jews were hiding and were arrested. Some Jews never heard about the deportations or were too old. As a result, 500 of Denmark's Jews were sent to the Theresienstadt ghetto. Only 51 of the 500 did not survive the Holocaust. Hundreds, possibly thousands of normal Danes sprung into action to save their fellow Jewish neighbors. Some warned the Jews and others were fishermen who brought Jews in their boats to Sweden. Without these normal people willing to help, 7,800 more Jews could have been murdered in the Holocaust.
By late 1942, the resistance was gaining strength and momentum. Yet in a strategic blunder, the Germans allowed national elections the following spring. Almost 90% of the population voted and overwhelmingly rejected the Nazis. Strikes and protests came next, but the authorities quickly outlawed any public assembly, and a curfew was instituted when the resistance continued to attack. Finally, on August 29, 1943, martial law was instituted. Having negotiated with the Social Democrats and dispersed the Communists, the Germans turned their eyes to the Jews. After having harassed them for years, they undertook a secret plan in September to sweep up the entire community on the night of the Jewish New Year, when they thought all the Jews would be at home.
Min mor, hun var
My mother was an Orthodox Jew, but she didn't practice, and though my father was a Christian, she and I had to flee for our safety.
As the army marched house to house, they were stunned to find no one. Nearly all the Jews had vanished, having been tipped off about the impending purge. The race to escape was on. The Jews headed for coastal ports, knowing freedom lay just across the Öresund Strait. Neutral Sweden had committed to accept the Jewish refugees. While some Germans turned a blind eye towards the fleeing population, others conducted a relentless search. No place was safe.
For the local, it was a big risk. People should understand that it was very dangerous to help the Jewish people.
Yet help the locals did, displaying remarkable courage in the face of a terrifying foe. They hid the Jews by day, then slipped them onto fishing boats for the stealth voyage at night. It took almost 2 months.
They was hidden under the nets. They could hear what happens. And you imagine how scary it was for them.
Despite the locals' best efforts, some Jews were captured. Others had to make life-changing decisions in a moment.
Men hun var jo alene, og ingen af jøderne vidste jo, om de kom levende over til Sverige.
My mother, she was alone, and none of the Jews knew if they would make it to Sweden alive. So she made the decision to leave me with one of the fishermen's families until after the war. I was devastated, but knew my mother had given me my best chance at life.
More than 600 times the boats crept out into the darkness, slowly making their way toward the beacon of freedom. More than 99% of Danish Jews managed to survive the war. A remarkable statistic when compared to the casualties experienced by Jews in other European countries.
Many Danish people helped me in dangerous times. And after the war, I was lucky enough to find my parents again. So fate was very kind to me.
Så skæbnen var rigtig mild mod mig.
Denmark was a remarkable country who took a stand during the Holocaust and did what no other country would. Denmark saved 90% of their Jews from persecution by the Nazis. Denmark took a stand against the evil. Every other country could have done the same. If other countries behaved the way Denmark did, so many more Jews could have been saved during this tragic genocide. Denmark didn't see people as Jews or non-Jews, but saw them as Danes. Denmark didn't discriminate or turn a blind eye, but instead sprung into action to do the most possible to save their Jewish community. Denmark's heroic actions must not be forgotten. It is so unfortunate that this terrible genocide occurred because our world didn't react the way Denmark did.